coming as it did when the school holidays were in sight, and interest in affairs of state was yielding to anxieties about the harvest and the condition of the pound sterling on the foreign exchange. Medieval conflicts had seldom begun until the crops had been safely gathered in. Corbishley was something of an historien manqué, and had made some studies of the causes of war and the timing of battles, and armchair economists, he had realized long ago, tended to take an instant stance on international fiscal policy only after they had bought their holiday travel currency. What had led to the good turnout of members at Mellanby this afternoon, and therefore ensured the member a worthwhile audience, was not an interest in politics at all, but the venue of the meeting. The annual summer meeting of the branch of the association was always held, by special invitation, at Mellanby Place, which was by far the grandest house in the neighbourhood. It was this he knew perfectly well, rather than the presence of the Member of Parliament, which accounted for the floral dresses of the ladies and the tidy attire of their farmer husbands. It wasn't every day of the week by any means that the inhabitants of the village of Mellanby and its environs took afternoon tea on the terrace of Mellanby Place at the invitation of its owner. Thus reminded, Peter Corbishley cast a covert glance at their host to see how he was taking the heckler's interruption. Throughout the history of Calleshire, the Rawleys of Mellanby had been celebrated as men of action, and the present and last of that ilk, Bertram Millington Hervey Rawley, was no exception. Moreover, he belonged to that exalted class of persons who saw no need whatsoever to consult with anyone else at all before embarking on the course of action of his choice, and certainly not before holding a political meeting in his own grounds. The family motto, Amicis Calibertora, emblazoned above the splendidly embellished chimney-piece in the great hall of Mellanby Place, meant that any hour was all right for friends. And everyone else can go to hell, its owner was wont to add, when pointing it out. So far, Peter Corbishley was happy to see Bertram Rawley was sitting quietly on the little platform that had been improvised on the terrace on the south-facing aspect of the house. He was on the other side of the branch chairman, Major Derek Puiver. Not, Peter Corbishley would have been the first to admit, that Bertram Rawley's apparent quietness meant that he wasn't contemplating action. Throughout history, great landed proprietors have been notoriously sensitive to intruders of any nature, and Rawley might just be taking the man's measure, or rather less happily, measuring his distance. The chairman of the branch association was, the Member of Parliament knew, unlikely to be taking such a relaxed view. The Major was a born warrior, and, as such, admirably suited to have been in full command of a supplies depot in the Korean War. In his mind's eye, Peter Corbishley could imagine the Major now running through a mental list of increasingly unfortunate scenarios, like having a real nutter on their hands, or worse, a zealot. At least, thought the member philosophically, it made a change from having barracking undergraduates from the University of Calleshire around. Cohorts of these were apt to turn up at his meetings, and not bent on the pursuit of pure learning either. Actually, now he came to think about it, the heckler did look a little out of the ordinary. Assured that Bertram Rawley was at least sitting quietly for the time being, and only then, Peter Corbishley had allowed his gaze to drift in the direction of the man, without its appearing to do so. The dissident member of the audience, he certainly wasn't a member of the association if he behaved as he was doing, was thin and rather wild-looking, and a little bit younger than Corbishley had expected. His hair was almost as long as a woman's, and his voice shook with feeling as he shouted for the fourth time at Peter Corbishley, "Why don't you drop dead?" The Member of Parliament carried on with his speech with practised smoothness. The moment at which a public speaker acknowledged the existence of a heckler, if indeed he ever did, was a matter of fine political judgment, and the politician in Corbishley wanted to know what this particular heckler had in mind, beyond his, Peter Corbishley's, own immediate demise, that is, before he entered into any sort of dialogue with him. "You heard me," declared the heckler, in tones designed to carry. Since everyone present on the lawn in front of Mellanby Place, to say nothing of those attending to the preparation